Ladies and gentlemen, the next session is Digital Trade Conversation. Digital Trade, Standards and Interoperability. The session will be using the online interactive Q&A, and if you want to post your questions and comments as well as vote for them, please check out the screen. We'll show it to you again in a while. Pigeonhole.at, and you can put the passcode SMW2022, and that will allow you to vote for questions. So yes, it's on screen now. Please help to scan the QR code, and you can vote for that, just like how the questions were shown just now in the previous panel. Allow me to introduce your panel. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome them. Your session moderator will be joining us online. She is Priyanka Deva, Global Leader for Digital Supply Chain and Senior Technical Staff Member, IBM. And joining Priyanka on stage on the panel are, let's welcome first and foremost, Thomas Bagge, Chief Executive Officer, Digital Container Shipping Association, DCSA. Let's give him a round of applause, please. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for the applause. Thank you. Let's welcome Antoine Cadoux, Chief Executive Officer, SGTraDex. Welcome. Please join me in welcoming Joshua Kroeker, Chief Product Officer, Contour. Big hand, please. Thank you. And last but not least, we have Juan-Jose Ruiz, Head of Strategy and Business Development, TradeLens IBM Ecosystems. Let's give a big hand to our panel, please, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome, audience, and I welcome the panelists as well. Thank you. It's unfortunate that I can't be there today in spite of being in Singapore, but with this hybrid model, I'm sure we will be able to get the most out of this session. So we have our esteemed guests today and industry leaders. And if, just in case if you're thinking that why am I the panel moderator for this, I have a vested interest in this. I come from IBM supply chain, and IBM has its own end-to-end supply chain with presence in 47 countries. We manufacture the Z mainframe storage. So that leads to parts, packaging, freights, and that's where you can see that what industry leaders are going to be talking about is of extreme importance to the broader audience here and also to IBM. So today's panel is going to be focusing on 4 very important areas. First is standardization. What are the standards we are talking about and why we are talking about those standards? How those standards impact the digital trade opportunities. Secondly, we are going to talk about what's the future of the current and trade and supply chain. Third is what are game-changing technologies? And at the heart of it is what are some of the technology gaps that we are talking about? So to kickstart this conversation, I would first want to invite Thomas. And Thomas, would you be able to share with us that what standardization we are talking about in the container shipping and why it is important, why people should be even talking about standardization? We all want to know why and what are the benefits. So would you be able to share with us and kickstart this whole conversation by talking about what are the standards we are talking about in container shipping? And second is why we should be paying attention to standards.
Thank you, Priyanka, and for the invitation to come here today. Yeah, I think in many ways our daily lives is filled with interoperability, but in the certainly in the container shipping industry and perhaps even in the larger supply chain industry, international trade, to some degree, we are still lacking interoperability, and therefore standards create the ability to interoperate. And we see that in banking, we see it in telco, we see it in many other industries. And we have a massive opportunity in front of us here if we were to embark on a journey of standardization, whether it's trade documents, whether it's IoT-enabled equipment to track or better track containers, whether it is to optimize the ports and terminals, There are many things where when we look at the different sectors that we can go through, where let's say standards will enable interoperability and get a better customer experience and let's say more efficiency in our industry.
Thank you, Thomas. And I just want to take some of the key points that you highlighted there, which is interoperability, trade documents, customer experience, and taking customer experience as the cue. Antoine, I want to turn to you, and can you share your thoughts, your view on how the collaboration between the public and the private stakeholders drives this digital standards and interoperability? We are talking about customer service here. So private and public stakeholders, they become extremely important for us.
Thanks. Maybe let me start, since SGTraDex was mentioned a couple of times previously this morning, by giving you a little bit of the vision on what we are trying to do, correct? So we are really trying to build efficiency and resilience in the supply chain and trade ecosystem. And the initiative, again, it's a public-private joint venture that was created, responding to what we saw during COVID. And I think during COVID, it was very clear that, there is a need for efficiency, there is a need for communication of data between participants. At the same time, and just before COVID, we saw also a couple of, fraud that sort of rocked the trade finance ecosystem. And therefore, what's interesting is that the conversation kind of moved away from purely around operational efficiency. I share data, I share information to improve my operation, toward sharing data for also resilience, managing risk, and growth. And therefore, we've embarked at SGTraDex into this public-private partnership to create what we call, a neutral digital highway, okay, that is open to all, and that is not driven by profit. So what we do, what we enable is the trusted sharing of data between supply chain participants. At the same time, we respect also, the commercial sensitivity of the participant. And maybe, later in the discussion, I can mention what we are doing, how we are really bringing that to bear around use case. So what we are trying to solve are, really problem for the industry and for the participants. So one of the problem statement that we are currently solving by connecting participants is around bunkering optimization. So we know that bunkering is a large, sector and industry in Singapore. It's around a $25 to $50 billion market. You have a variety of players and participants in this ecosystem, and the ecosystem has been, historically very paper-based, as well as, relying also paper-based, and so therefore a little bit, we've seen some fraud in the system, and therefore, we want to get rid of paper. So the idea is to get rid of paper and to go toward paperless processes to reduce the risk and improve efficiency. And to achieve that, we are working closely with MPA. MPA is the regulator for this sector. MPA is who can sort of guide the sector. However, the business problems are coming from the private sector. And therefore, it's bringing the two together, having clear regulation, but having also a clear understanding of the problem statement. That's the value of the public-private partnership.
Great. Thank you. And with that, Josh, can I invite you from Contour to just talk about introduce yourself, as well as what is Contour doing? What key role Contour is playing in digitizing the trade there?
Sure, happy to. So I think we've talked a lot about the physical supply chain today, about how goods are moving and some of those pain points and how we can digitize. And what Contour is doing is they're looking at trade from the financial supply chain. And these two worlds, the financial supply chain, the physical supply chain, are of course incredibly interlinked. And for one to grow, it needs the other to grow as well. And for one to digitize, it needs the other to digitize as well. So Contour came out of 8 banks that decided they wanted to collaborate and solve a common problem for the industry and create a company, an infrastructure to connect the world's corporates and banks to streamline and digitize trade finance. And really what we're here today is to expand that partnership beyond just banks and corporates and the network that we're building to that physical supply chain. So when we talk about standards and interoperability, I really define interoperability as that really important connection, which is between the goods moving, the transfer being titled, the title being transferred, sorry, and then, of course, the important information that allows finance to happen, making sure it isn't going to a sanctioned port, making sure it can have the proper KYC and AML checks on it. So we talked earlier today about data and making sure data is shared. I guess I'm here to urge everyone in the physical supply chain to please do, share your data with your corporate clients so that they can share that data with their financing providers, and then that can make trade finance easier, more readily available. The biggest problem we have in trade finance is the trade finance gap. You often hear this number quoted, $1.7 trillion trade finance gap by the Asia Development Bank. This is a big problem. People are not going to put their goods on your ships if they do not have comfort that they're going to get paid on the other side, or if they don't have the working capital to support that trade. So to support trade growth, I think we need to support trade finance growth. And to support trade finance growth, we have to digitize. So I think through partnership and through collaboration and standardization, which we've talked about today, we're well on our way to achieving that goal. And I think we're excited to announce that the future is here. This isn't some future thing that the banks are working on that might come around in 2030, but we've been growing our network exponentially, and we're adding new companies of every size, from SMEs to large corporates around the world today.
Great, thank you. So with that, Juan, I want to invite you, and we talked about interoperability, we talked about standardization, we talked about the physical and financial supply chain, and all of that converges into the technology, into the platform. So I invite you to just share about yourself, a brief introduction, and also share with us that how IBM service providers, technology platforms like IBM, they're weaving these standards, this industry needs into, along with technologies, and then making it available through scalable and innovative and trusted platforms for the ecosystem partners.
Yeah, thank you, Priya, and thank you everyone for attending today, and the organizers for having me speak on this panel. Working for a technology company, I feel like a kid in a candy store, right? There is so much technology that has been developed in the last few years. Blockchain, AI, robot process automation, and our job really as technology providers, and specifically within the TradeLens platform that I'm part of, is really look at all those technologies and how we can package them in a way that we solve real business problems. And obviously, when TradeLens started a few years ago, we didn't want to reinvent any well. We didn't want to reinvent any standards. So we started using the UN CFAC supply chain data reference model. We obviously also collaborate with DCSA on the standards that are putting together. So looking at all this wealth of technology, looking at implementing those standards into solutions that can really solve industry problems, that was kind of the initial concept. And then talking a little bit more about TradeLens, what TradeLens is. So TradeLens is an open and neutral industry platform for everybody who participates in containerized trade, so all the goods that are put in a container and exchanged globally. So all those entities can better collaborate with each other by sharing data in real time. So we are an ecosystem of ports, terminals, shipping lines, customs, government authorities, and the beneficial cargo owners themselves that allows for that seamless exchange of information across all those parties. And we can only do that thanks to all those technology developments. And I will agree to the people that were presenting earlier today that this is the time. Like the amount of technology that is available to solve your specific problems today is there already. And there are application providers and technology providers that are already using that technology to make improve sustainability and all the great goals that we have in maritime tech. And it's just a matter now to basically implement and adopt those solutions to gain the goals and work towards the goals that we're all trying to achieve.
Juan, I want to take one of the key points that you and George highlighted, which is about data sharing. And we know that there are certain hesitations around data sharing, that how the data is going to be used, whether the platforms on which we are sharing the data, can I trust those platforms? So would you be able to share a little bit about data sharing, that how the ecosystem partners, what are some of the barriers, inherent barriers that we see in data sharing, and how the ecosystem partners can overcome those barriers?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question. And so just elaborating on what I was saying earlier, right? So usually you need technology, right? In the past, data has been exchanged point to point, right? Through phone conversations, emails, or in technical terms, EDI protocols. And that was just point-to-point sharing of information. And now with cloud technologies and microservices and APIs and all this great stuff, what we're moving towards is a model where information is shared many-to-many, right? So for information to be uploaded into the cloud, and everybody who needs access to that information, getting access to the exact same information that everybody's looking at. So that's a fundamental change. And for that to happen, you need to work on a data governance model, right? Who is going to share what information? Who's going to have access to that information when it's available in that kind of cloud, right? So that's something that we work very hard at TradeLens, create a data governance in partnership with the industry in terms of defining data access rights and who needs to provide data and who get access to the data. And that's part of what we sell joining the TradeLens ecosystem. So that's what you do as an organization. You don't just decide to use technology to improve the sharing of data. You're basically signing up to a data governance model that is becoming an industry standard.
I'll maybe add a bit to that from the financial supply chain side. So obviously financial data is quite sensitive as well, and the only way I was ever going to connect all of the world's bank and corporate data was to have a decentralized network. So we're based on blockchain. Everyone has the ability to host their own data. None of that data comes to Contour. We are not an Amazon that our long-term play is to monetize data, and I think that's absolutely necessary in today's day and age. In terms of the data that we want from shipping companies or what the financial supply chain needs from the physical supply chain, it's very simple. We don't actually want any of it. We just want you to give it to Juan in TradeLens or your favorite EBL platform. We don't need real-time data on the temperature of the container or the exact GPS coordinates. Banks just need to know who owns those goods at any particular point in time and where those goods went. That is it. And an electronic bill of lading does this in a fantastic way. I think the biggest transformation in trade finance in the last 500 years is the bill of lading. It allowed you to finance a piece of paper instead of financing real goods. We just haven't quite moved on from that yet. So my ask is that if every bill of lading is an electronic bill of lading, it is the #1 ask to digitize trade finance. So that's the only data that we need, and you don't have to give it to us, just give it to your favorite EBL platform.
And maybe I can add on that also, and I'm not going to talk about EBL because it's a difficult topic, but I'm going to talk about, bunkering delivery note, which is going to move to an EBDN, and specifically on, the bunkering sector. So that's one of the use cases that we are currently developing. We're going to go live at the end of April or early May with this use case. And so what we've done, again, with the support of MPA, with this public-private partnership is, come to the realization that, if we want Singapore to sort of retain its world's leading position as a bunkering hub, there is a clear need to move away from the paper process, okay? Because as we mentioned, they are highly inefficient, and second, they are more susceptible to the risk of fraud. So what we've done as a public-private partnership, we have 40 organizations, or almost 50 organizations that are piloting this use case and going to go live soon. And the participants range from MNCs as well as SMEs. So they are really representative of the entire supply chain ecosystem, correct? So a typical supply chain ecosystem, meaning that it's very heterogeneous. So in terms of the nature of the business, in terms of the fundamental of the business, in terms of the size of the business, as well as in terms of the maturity, the digital maturity of the business. So to give you, more kind of a real example on that, we have 10 persona in the use case, okay? Starting with, the vessel owner and the vessel operator, who is, the receiver of the fuel, correct, in the Singapore maritime port. But we have also, the cargo trader, the licensed bunker supplier. We have bunker tanker operator, Those are the barge that are, bring the fuel to the vessel. We have oil terminal operator, surveyor, as well as the bank, so the financial institution, and also, some application and platform that are providing, workflow management tool, workflow management solution, or ERP solution in the network. And what we are doing, it's exchanging data between those participants, okay? But exchanging data, again, to solve the two problem statement we mentioned, which is reducing the risk of fraud and then enabling, efficiency in the markets. And the type of data that we are exchanging is very much like, Just was mentioning, we talk about document data. So think about it as a certificate of quality. Think about it as a bill of lading. Think about it as this bunkering delivery note. We talk also about logistical data. So where is the vessel event, barge event. And then we exchange also near real-time data, from IoT source. And one example of that is, the velocity profile that's going to come out of the Coriolis mass flow meter that are installed on the bunker barge. All right, so, and the richness of the use case and the value that the participant, see from the use case is, again, twinning those different type of data, twinning those different type of flow, the document flow, the financial flow, the physical flow, so that we can ascertain, again, that the trade is genuine. So we see, real value for the participant, and real value, not only for the MNC, but also for SMEs in the market that, should be able to access more liquidity in the market, that should be able to, access financing in maybe a few hours. Now, it takes a few days or a few weeks for them to access financing, and therefore, they should be able to better manage their cash flow, better manage their working capital. So, a lot of value for the ecosystem. And what's very, very interesting, in this use case is that I feel that we are demonstrating also, some of the benefit that we set out when we launched this initiative, correct? So the public-private partnership. So clearly, it's an industry-led but government-supported initiative. And we are sort of co-developing the solution together, all right, to kind of speed up the realization of the solution. We are demonstrating also the value of what we call a little bit, co-opetition. So we are bringing competitors together, but competitors that share a common problem and decide to work together to solve this problem, rather than solving the problem on their own. We are also trying to demonstrate this interoperability story, correct? So interoperability between the participant system, but interoperability also between, platform, because at the end of the day, we know that not one trade finance platform, not one supply chain platform will solve all the problem, and therefore we need to be interoperable. We need to be able to exchange customer, we need to be able to, exchange data. And we believe that, by bringing this together, we show really, the benefit of digital trade adoption, which is, again, create trust in the ecosystem by reducing the risk of fraud. Two, it's about, increasing access to trade finance, especially for the SMEs. That's what's just also mentioned. And three, reducing the cost for improving efficiency. And to conclude on this example, what's interesting is that we are doing that, in the Singapore ecosystem, but we are doing that at scale. The bunkering market is a significantly large market, 25 to 50 billion. So doing that at scale, demonstrating the benefit for the ecosystem, and I think it's a really interesting use case that we are promoting here.
Antoine, great point. And we are getting a lot of questions on the Pigeonhole. And Thomas, I want to turn to you. We talked about documentation, data sharing, interoperability, co-developing. And I look at it, the foundation for everything is standards. Considering the DCSA was established in 2019, would you be able to share with us that how the industry stakeholders can get involved in those standard creation? Because when we talk about sharing the data, digitization, every stakeholder, every industry ecosystem partner may be following their own standards, and everybody would want to have a stake of everybody would want to have a seat on the table. I'm sorry about that. So would you be able to share with us that how some of the key industry stakeholders can get more involved in that standard creation?
Apologies if I don't answer the question correctly. We have a bit of an echo up here, as was said earlier.
Sorry.
So the way that we work is that we bring parties together. Whether, of course, we have our founding members, but we know that supply chains is much broader than that. Of course, the container carriers have the important role of transporting the goods from A to B, but we also know that none of the goods, they end their journey at the ports. So they are transported inland, as was mentioned earlier. It goes to warehouses and through multimodal. So if we really want to create an interoperable system, we need to have the standards. So that's why what we try to do is we try to bring the parties together. So we work with the ports here, of course, MPA, PSA. We work with the Port of Rotterdam and many ports all over the world to try and create let's say, a standard language to speak. Once you have the standard language, you will have a lot of the interoperability that the gentlemen here on stage are talking about, because it's easier to exchange data if we, by saying vessel arrival, we actually mean the same thing. That's not the case at the moment, and there are many such examples where the basic common language is missing. And so the role that we have a set of foundational activities. So the first role of that is really to create a common language. And once we have that, we've been able, with the Bill of Ladings standards that we've pushed out, we've been able to enable that digital exchange. Now there's other things that are preventing it. Singapore and the Electronics Transfer Act, ETA, that was published in, I believe, February of 2021, is a phenomenal step in the way of actually allowing the, let's say, the electronic exchange of the documents that are several hundred years old. We don't need those documents anymore, but we need legislative changes in many countries to enable that they will go away, whether it's bills of exchange, whether it's promissory notes, whether it's bills of lading, etc. I think, or at least it's my hope, that the tidal wave that is coming, and that was alluded to earlier with the investments that are coming into our industry, that means transformation. And when we sit here in 5 years, I'm quite sure that we will see, I would hope we are a double-digit electronic bill of ladings for sure, but we definitely see that picking up. And we see that with TradeLens, we see it with many of the other providers of bill of ladings. I believe the number was 0.2% of the members that we represent in 2019, then it's increased to 0.8%. Now it's at 1.2%. But there's still a massive opportunity for the industry to go more digital.
So talking about industry, there is a very interesting question from the audience, which is, what can Singapore learn or reuse from other global frontrunners in maritime supply chain connectivity or other industries? And I want to invite the perspective from all the panelists on this question. So I'm just going to repeat the question, which is, what can Singapore learn or reuse from other global frontrunners in maritime supply chain connectivity or other industries?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. So it's all about adoption, right? We're speaking here. We have standards, we have the technology. In TradeLens, we already have more than 1,000 companies collaborating in real time. And we talk about small companies like a truck operator, but also big companies like our friends at CMA, right? So those organizations are already exchanging data. So the key is to make it really, really easy to use. Right? The only way that you're going to get adoption is by making sure that those data providers have an easy way to provide that data. And so, yeah, we're talking about APIs, but we also had to develop, as part of our integration framework, a way for some truck operators to change data using an Excel spreadsheet, right? So it's about meeting your customer or your constituent where they are in the digitization journey, right? There's a lot of companies that are investing a lot in digitization, others don't invest in that much. So we meet those ecosystem members where they are and make it very, very easy for them to exchange the data. And the same on the other side, right? We have big corporations that, yes, can integrate the TradeLens APIs to make sure that the data that they get from us is fed into the ERP systems. There are other SMEs that just can go into our website and get the data directly from the website and also save it as a CSV file, right? So I think what we can learn is, in terms of adoption, is to make sure that you're meeting your constituents wherever they are and help them in their digitization journey.
I may focus on the first part of that question, which is that it's not new. And I would say I would agree. You know, the first electronic bill of lading was available over 20 years ago. So what has changed and what needs to change to sort of change this tide? I think the work that's happening in standards is really important. The work that's happening in where data resides through decentralized systems has changed. I think that's going to be a big thing. But what's really missing now is just for the whole industry to give confidence to the people who are actually doing the shipping, the buyers, the sellers, the importers and exporters, that their electronic data will be accepted at the port. That nobody along the chain is going to say, no, I actually need paper for this. Because that's kind of what's stopping it a little bit, right? Is this, at some point, somebody's going to ask for a piece of paper, and until everyone is 100% confident that they don't need it for their bank, which I can assure you they don't need it at the port, they don't need it with their buyer, that a digital alternative is acceptable, then I think we'll start to see that real change, and we'll start to see the real accelerant of growth.
Thank you.
So maybe just to add and rebound on that. So I mean, when we think about trade digitalization, I mean the first realization, correct, is to understand that it's not one problem, correct? It's a couple of problems that we need to solve with sort of different capability that we need to have, around business, technology, and legal aspect, correct? And so I think we all agree on this stage that, if we think about the tech aspect, the interoperability, the issuance of the EBL, I mean, that's not really where the problem lies, correct? The technology is ready, we can use it. Harmonizing, data and standard is also, obviously, critical, but a lot of standard exists now. A lot of standard exists, so it's more about adopting the standard. It's really about adopting the standard. It's promoting the standard and making sure that we use the standard that makes sense. And then after there is solving really the legal challenge, correct? So in the short term, if we think about different platforms, also how you solve this short term, the private law in the short term. So that's a question mark. And the longer term is obviously the electronic document and recognition of the electronic document, very similar to the paper document. And we've seen, obviously, Singapore adopting the MLETR law, so the ETA. We've seen also Bahrain. We know that the UK also are moving toward that. So if we think about the trade ecosystem with UK and Singapore law, a lot of the trade, should be supported soon, hopefully, should support soon, electronic document. And the last point after for interoperability, obviously, it's creating a business model that works for, the platform and the participant, so that we can really collaborate. Okay.
Thank you, Antoine. Thomas, do you have a view on this? On this specific question, that what can Singapore learn and reuse from other global frontrunners?
Quite frankly, we work globally naturally, but I must admit I'm really impressed with the speed that Singapore has moved. Having lived here, I know a bit about the government's approach to how to conduct business, and what I really, especially, have always liked is that there's very little distance between thought and action. And so I would say in many ways Singapore is a global forerunner when it comes to, for instance, enabling digital trade as they did in February of last year. The unfortunate thing about that is that not a lot of cargo originate from Singapore or ends in Singapore when you look at it in a global perspective. And that's why we need, it's very positive to see that the UK Law Commission in connection with Brexit is also working to enable the electronic transfer of documents. And of course we have the, as was just mentioned before, MLETR from the UN. But I think if there's one thing we can all do here is go home and lobby for that to happen. We see it in India, we've seen it in Japan, we see it in some Middle Eastern countries, but it's still, we have quite some way to go.
All right, thank you. We do have another question from the audience, which is, we talked about data sharing, some of the inherent challenges or barriers of data sharing. A specific question from the audience is that what are some of the risks from their perspective, and why are they hesitant to, why the top maritime business is hesitant to share the data, and what are some of the top risks from their perspective? So again, I would like to open it up to all the panelists. If if you want to comment.
I mean, I can start, and so I think the question is a bit, it's kind of broad, because all data is not equal. So I think that's the first, understanding that. So you have, operational data, you have financial data, and some of the data is less sensitive than the other. So you really need to segment and segregate, the type of data you are exchanging. After, one of the barrier, to adoption of data sharing is there is a sort of asymmetry between the, the data contributor and the data consumer. And so how you solve for that, it's a question that still need to be answered. And the way we are trying to solve for that at SGTraDex is that by, building multiple use cases. Therefore, you might be a contributor on one of the use cases, but then you might be a consumer on the other use case. And when you consume the data, usually you benefit from the data because you're going to do something with the data.
Yeah, I recall a conversation I had with a large shipping company back when I worked for a bank 5 years ago. I won't name the shipping company. And we were talking about how sharing data would be mutually beneficial. But then when it got to the point of saying, okay, we'd like you to share this data with us to make the trade finance process, it then became a financial conversation. Because I think at some point, I don't know who's responsible for this, people really overvalued data. And some consultant somewhere said, your data is the most valuable asset you have, you should be paid a lot for it. And therefore everyone held their data. And they would only give it out if they would have some sort of financial return, rather than focusing again on the mutual benefits of data sharing. And I think this has been a real stumbling block for people in terms of coming up with the business case of sharing data. And until they can monetize their data, and I hate that term, they've stopped. So I think we need to move past business cases around monetizing data. And I think it was mentioned on an earlier panel about not doing that and trying to think about the value-added processes on top of it. And I think if we can do that, we can move a long way forward.
That's absolutely right. And I will just add from the point of view of TradeLens, like when you join TradeLens, you are sharing data, which means it's both ways. So there is some data that you are providing to your customers or the entities you work with that need access to the data, but you're getting all the data in return, right? So if you're a tracker, you have some data about what's happening on the inland move, but by joining TradeLens, you will be able to share that data with the port, with the ocean shipping line, with the BCO, and those entities will share data back to you in return so that you can better plan for your own things. And that's where this community and based kind of data sharing model works, right? You're sharing data because you're incentivized, because you're getting also data in return. And yeah, in some cases, maybe you want some financial incentive. The only other thing I wanted to add, there is data, when talking data, I think Antoine mentioned it very, very rightly, right? There is some data that is just event data that has no commercial sensitivity, and there is, EBLs or packing lists or commercial invoice that have a lot of sensitivity, right? So when we're doing data sharing, we cannot put everything in one bucket, right? In terms of sharing events, yes, definitely. They are already being shared, even if you don't know it, right? Even through a carrier website or somebody who's web scrubbing, some other websites. That data is already being shared, so why don't you do it in a more efficient way so that you can better support your customers? A lot of our companies use this data sharing approach to improve their customer experience. So they don't get customers calling in them all the time, like, where is the container? Where are the goods? Like, well, you have the data directly. You can even consulting you yourself, right? So I just wanted to qualify that a little bit more.
And that's a great point, Juan and Josh, that you have made. Then the data is already being shared. It's just that we put a very conscious focus on, can you share your data on the platform? So with that, and I'm extremely sensitive to the time of the audience and the panelists as well. So I want to wrap up this session by inviting all of you to share your thought that how we can get more industry players to take part in this digital standardization. Would you have any parting thoughts for the audience on this? So Thomas, I would invite you to start first, that how can we get more industry players to take part in this digital standardization?
Oh, it's a good question. Thank you for that. Listen, I don't think we could go, if we'd gone back 3 years and tried to choreograph and chart out a path to where we are today, it would be impossible simply because of the many unexpected things that continue to happen, whether it's, vessel stuck in the Suez Canal, or whether it's COVID, or whether it's geopolitical issues. So I think for me, it's like a 10-dimensional chess game. There are thousands of pieces, and we just need to keep on going at it. So I don't sit with, unfortunately, a silver bullet here.
Thank you.
Maybe, I mean, just one comment. So, I mean, we talk about digitalization, correct, of supply chain and trade, and I think what's important to realize, it's happening, correct? It's happening, it's real. It's not anymore, a LinkedIn post that say, okay, we've done one live transaction. So it's happening in production, and it's going to happen at scale. So, as a participant in the ecosystem, it's probably something you want to shape. It's something you want to be part of. So I would encourage you, to reach out, talk to us, join us. We have a lot of use cases that are covering the maritime sector, working with other platforms. So please reach out.
Yeah, I would say it's a very collaborative space. I think it's really changed, and we're really open to working together. I think we all work together on this panel, and we want to expand that sort of group working together to achieve this common goal.
Yeah, it's start using the solutions that are available already, right? I think that is the time to wait was before. Now all the solutions are integrated with each other, we're collaborating with each other, we're using all international standards. So that's feel that not excuse anymore. Just start doing it, right? And also that will help you with kind of your talent challenge, right? A lot of conversations yesterday were about how do I get talent in the organization. So fully agree with the comment that was made earlier around it's about your employees, they need to use these tools to be more productive, right? So by embracing these technologies or these applications, you are going to have a more productive organization, and people are going to want to join you more because you are using these new tools that are exciting and innovative.
Thank you, Juan. So with that, I want to wrap up this session, and I want to thank each of the panelists here. I truly hope that the audience was able to get a lot out of this panel session. We talked about the importance of standard. We talked about interoperability. We talked about collaboration to innovate, as well as to solve the common industry problem that this industry is facing today. So with that, thank you very much, all the panelists, and thank you, audience, for making time to attend this session.
Thank you very much, Priyanka. Thank you. And thank you to our distinguished panel as well. Thank you very much. Just a reminder to wear your mask, and we'd like to invite you back to your seats. Thank you very much. Take your time. Take your time.